guys, my name is Flux, and today I'm joined by Leon Kehyeyan, and he is from La Maison Monaco. We're going to be doing a deep dive on watches, so everything you need to know basically from the basics all the way to top 3 for women and the top 3 for men, so make sure you stay posted. All right, Leon, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your experience, because I think you've been in this for quite a long time, even maybe second generation.
That's right. I've been in the watch and jewelry business for about close to 10 years now. It's a family business. I was never forced or pushed into the family business. I randomly found a passion for specifically watches, although I enjoy jewelry as well. I found a passion for watches when I was much younger. I threw myself into this world and I haven't looked back since.
Oh, very cool. I love that. All right, so now we're going to dive deep into the top watches for 2024. He's prepared a list for us, so we're going to go over, all of the basics. But before we even jump into that, I really want to know what makes a watch popular. Is it the history? Is it who wore what? Is it, limited edition runs, so scarcity? I'm really curious.
There are the icons, right?
Yeah.
So the icons will say the icons, they're always going to be popular and they're going to be somewhat accessible. So if you look at, for example, the Omega Speedmaster, available, Rolex Submariner a little less available, Cartier Tank, different variations of the Cartier Tank will be available. But then you have the limited runs of watches based on these icons. So for example, Cartier Crash, right? This was a watch that wasn't irrelevant. It had its place in the watch collecting community, but it gained mainstream popularity lately because if it takes one celebrity sometimes to wear something, and it takes a lot of popularity. Cartier has their privé collection where they make a limited run of watches, and it's based on one of those iconic models. So whether it's the Crash or the Tank or the Tank Américaine or whichever model, they make a limited run of it, and these are highly sought after and therefore will have a very big resale value after purchase. So that's something to consider. What makes these watches gain value? Some of them really is the brands just controlling their stock, artificial scarcity. Some brands, I believe, can produce more watches, but they choose to lower the production, which I understand as well. I understand. We see it in fashion brands all the time. We see it with Louis Vuitton, we see it with Hermes.
Or Birkins.
Birkins, exactly.
Is a perfect example.
I actually believe that these watch companies took a few pages out of Hermes's book, because Hermes was the one who started doing this in the first place with the Birkin bags, of course. Luxury and exclusivity go hand in hand, so I completely understand. There are other practices that within the watch retail world that I don't like. For example, is making your customers beg for watches with certain brands that I do not like. But I would say some of them is an artificial scarcity. Some of them I would say is producing these timepieces, to the level of finishing that they are, it does take time. So I understand that there aren't millions of them being produced at once.
Yeah, I was actually just out of curiosity, how long does it take to produce one watch? Because it's so meticulously crafted, it must take at least, a month to produce a watch, or? The
answer varies widely. Okay. So if we're going to consider research and development before a watch get released, sometimes can take up to 5 to 8 years to just the research and development for a single timepiece. Now, only the production of a watch, in some cases, it could be as little as a week, or sometimes it could be a month or a few months, depending on the watch and the different complications. Okay. Because we do know that some brands will produce the watch A to Z with every single component, so everything is done in-house, and certain brands will have different suppliers for different parts, of course. So putting all of that together, the answer could be weeks or months. Yeah.
Weeks or months. That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
I like it. I would love to just watch somebody assemble it. I think
it's quite fascinating. Yeah. It is quite fascinating. I could never do it.
Because the pieces are so small. Like, people don't realize that. They're just teeny little things. It's all going in. And in terms of so this is popularity, but how often do pieces fall out of favor? Do you ever see that, where pieces of high value will lose value? Does that happen, or?
If we look at the last few years, we had huge hype being built in, during the COVID year, the pandemic years, where we had everyone wanted to buy everything that was available, right? So certain models that you wouldn't think of buying or paying over retail for were doubling or tripling in value. That was just hype. So people got in it to make a quick buck. And then as soon as that crowd went out, the real enthusiast and collector stage. So a lot of models went even below retail in certain cases. If you look at, we use Rolex as an example because Rolex is the most popular watch brand. Let's just say, call it the way it is. It's a lot of watches that had no business trading over retail were trading at sometimes even double retail, and a lot of them are trading below retail right now. You know, the iconic ones like the steel sports models, they're always holding their value. As long as the watch you're buying has certain complications, has a certain quality, the brand has a certain history, it's going to hold a certain value, that is for sure.
Women's watches. I just want to start with this. Super curious. Why have we transitioned from smaller faces to much larger styles?
This is interesting because what I am noticing is, let's say from the 2005 more or less to let's say the late 2010s, we saw that men were wearing very large watches. So like, you know, your Breitlings and the large chronographs, men were wearing a lot of like larger, thicker watches. And now what we're seeing is men downsizing in watches. But also what's interesting is we're seeing women wear larger watches. So, and we're seeing some brands not even calling their watches men's watches or ladies' watches.
Just unisex.
Yeah, which I think is great. You know, some people, if they want to purchase a watch, let's say a man wants to buy a watch, which is typically and traditionally considered a small watch for men, when they see that it's labeled as a lady's watch, they might not be interested in buying it anymore because it's labeled as something. For example, if I have a smaller wrist and a 34 millimeter would be very suitable for my wrist, I would purchase their 34 millimeter watch, which, I mean, in the last, let's say, 10 years, 34 millimeter watches was considered a lady's watch.
Now let's dive into watches. Top 3 watches that we're seeing. Let's start with number 3.
Okay.
Yes.
Number 3 for ladies?
For ladies, yeah.
So I wanted to break this down into 3 different, let's say, price segments. Okay. So my number 3 for ladies would be a more of an entry-level product. I would say number 3 is the Longines Mini Dolce Vita for ladies. The Dolce Vita has always been very popular. It has a mini tank shape, right?
Okay, yeah.
And it's very elegant, either on a leather strap or on a metal bracelet. It has a very nice designed, unique metal bracelet, but I personally am a fan of the leather strap. For example, my personal favorite is the red leather strap. I think it's very elegant.
Okay.
It has different variations with diamonds on the casing or diamonds on the inside, and I think it's a very elegant timepiece.
And what range does it retail at, roughly?
So roughly we're looking at about the $2,000 Canadian price point. Can go a little bit higher for sure, maybe closer to double the price if we're going with a diamond case or whatnot, but we're looking at around that. But that's really good
for entry
yes,
entry level.
Of course.
Yeah, I like that. And for number 2?
Number 2, and this is my personal favorite, is the newer ladies Omega Constellation models. So earlier this year, Omega released the Constellation Meteorite dials. So we've seen a very, like, a growth in popularity with Meteorite dial watches. We see it in many different brands. Omega is doing it, Rolex is doing it. Different brands are using Meteorite dials now. Now, the integration of the Meteorite dial on the Omega Constellation, which is an iconic ladies' timepiece to start with, I think it's very nice because you're taking this classic timepiece. The Constellation has been in Omega for a very long time. I remember when I was younger, my grandma was wearing an Omega Constellation, so there's a rich history behind the Constellation with the integrated bracelet. And a Meteorite dial adds a funky look to a classic watch. And you have different variations. You have it in two-tone, you have blue meteorite, you have a gray meteorite, and with the diamond bezel, I think it looks very, very elegant for ladies.
Can I ask you a maybe stupid question?
By all means. By all means.
So, when you're saying meteorite, can you explain? Is it actually made of meteorite?
Yes.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, but how do they get it so fine?
I believe there are 2 places where meteorite has landed. If you look at the history of the world, one of them is in Africa and the other one is in Sweden. The name is way too long and complicated for me to even attempt to say it. This specific meteorite is with the one from Sweden. And yes, it gets cut out very finely and applied on the dial itself. Yes, no 2 dials will be the same. Now, although this is not a special or a limited edition, every single watch will be unique in that sense.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah, meteorite is really interesting material, and it's a very dense material, which is why I'm so impressed, actually. Wow. Okay.
Number 1, stepping up into a little bit of a higher price point. I think the Bulgari Serpenti always has a place in the ladies classic, right?
It
always
looks so elegant and so sleek. Yes.
Yes. We look at specs, right? Whether it's jewelry, whether it's watches, we know it's stainless steel. We know it's 18 karat gold, it's platinum, it's diamonds, it's VVS diamonds, it's 44 millimeter watch, 34 millimeter watch. So all of these things have specs. One thing that's not spoken about, because there is no real way of measuring it, is how does the watch feel? How is it engineered? How is the bracelet engineered, right? A watch can have the most fantastic specs, but if you put it on your wrist and it's very uncomfortable, I don't think that's worth much, if you ask me. Even if it has the most fascinating complications, even if it has the fanciest colored diamonds or sapphires. I think one thing that's not spoken about often, maybe because there isn't the language to talk about it online, let's say, or it's how does the watch feel? How is the bracelet engineered? And that's one thing that's very important. And this is one thing that the big brands, the high-end brands, they nail it. Not only because of, let's say, the complications or the finishing, but how does it actually fit on your wrist? How does the bracelet hug your wrist, right? Is it comfortable? And so this is something that Bulgari, being a watch and jewelry company, they nail across their rings, their bracelets, everything, their watches. So I think that's why the Bulgari Serpenti isn't only a beautiful watch to look at, but based on what I hear and with the interactions I have with the wearers of the Serpenti, is it's a very comfortable watch as well.
I love that. That is never spoken about. You're right. Yeah, and I can relate to that. I mean, my mom was gifted a watch, and she hated it, and she never wore it. It was too uncomfortable. So
there you go.
It speaks for itself. Yeah. Now let's go into men's watches. What are your top 3?
My top 3 for men, based on the interactions that I have with watch consumers, collectors, and enthusiasts. So number 3, I'm going to go with again Longines for number 3.
Okay.
Longines, the Longines Spirit Zulu Time, and this year it was released in the titanium. Last year we saw the stainless steel models in 39 millimeter. This year we see it in titanium. Value wise, this is one of the best watches I believe on the market. Longines is offering 5-year international warranty. This watch is a certified chronometer movement. It has a GMT, ceramic bezel, screw down crown, sapphire crystal, of course. In whatever way you look at this, how this watch is priced, it's a very, very good value watch. It's a very hard price point to beat, considering all the specs coming from a very reputable brand like Longines. 2 is this year's, again, this was not planned, by the way. It's Omega again. It's Omega again. Number 2 is the new white dial Omega Speedmaster Moonwatch. We mentioned the word Speedmaster a few times. That's an iconic timepiece for obvious reasons. It was the first watch worn on the moon, flight qualified for manned space missions by NASA. So the whole history is there. Now, we've seen previously different variations of the Moonwatch with a white dial. Now, Omega this year decided to reintroduce it. So a bit of a story about how they reintroduced this timepiece is we saw it on the wrist of Omega ambassador Daniel Craig last year at an event. Yes,
the James Bond watch.
Of course, so everyone was zooming into this saying, what is this watch? What is this watch? And then some people were able to capture a nice picture of a white dial Moonwatch with the red Speedmaster writing. So, earlier this year, Omega released this watch, and it lived up to its hype. And the pictures were beautiful, but seeing this watch in person, having a white lacquer dial, having applied numerals, applied black numerals. So on the basic Speedmaster, you have printed hour markers. On this one, you have them applied indices. Adds depth to the dial with the lacquer finish, the red Speedmaster writing. It's only $100 more than the regular Speedmaster. So at 11,000 Canadian dollars, I think this is a fantastic watch. Again, you get coaxial escapement, the manual the 3861 manual winding caliber, master chronometer, meaning COSC and Meta certified. I think this is probably one of the best watch releases of this year, and having handled a lot of these newer watches, probably one of the more beautiful watches I've seen this year. Yes.
Yeah, no, I saw it last time I saw you.
Definitely, yes.
It is
exactly,
a beautiful
yes.
watch, and I love that when you turn it over, you do see the movement behind,
Absolutely.
which I find really beautiful. So I love that. Yeah. So I guess that's a really good example. When a celebrity wears something, it will increase the value, right? In demand, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah.
Number 1 for me is going a bit into high horology, is a brand that is on fire lately. again, is not a brand that we work with, but you cannot be a watch enthusiast and not have a strong appreciation for this brand, is the Vacheron Constantin Overseas in yellow gold with a green dial.
Ooh.
Yes, this is my number one pick for this year. There are many, many great watches that came out this year. This one stuck with me. It's, I think Vacheron Constantin is growing as a brand. We saw, if we look at the Swiss watch exports or the Swiss watch report from last year, Vacheron Constantin has consistently growing. And I think this release with the Overseas itself, again, a very comfortable watch, integrated bracelet. We see the iconic Overseas bracelet with a very nice green dial. Again, pictures do not do this watch justice. It's something that you have to see in person. And it's a fantastic, fantastic green dial. And with a gold casing as well. Gold casing and bracelet. It's a beautiful watch.
I love a gold watch. Oh, I do. And what is the wait time for a piece like this?
It's a long time. It's a long time. Yes, definitely. I mean, production, with this high quality of a watch, I mean, the production isn't very high. I would assume for a novelty like this, you would have to already be a customer of Vacheron Constantin to be allocated this timepiece. But even at that, I assume that you're going to wait a few months, if not years.
A few months, if not years. Wow. Yeah. Okay, and what does it retail?
I don't want to give the wrong price point, but a full gold Vacheron Constantin, we're looking upwards of 50 to 60,000 Canadian dollars, I would say. This is without any complications.
This is what I don't understand in terms of like popularity, because sometimes we do see companies coming out with, beautiful watches, high watches like Gucci, for example, but they never really seem to, hold value on secondary markets or held at the same prestige, even though, in my opinion, I mean, I'm not a watchmaker, obviously, but when I look at them, the craftsmanship, the design is like absolutely beautiful. They're using, natural gemstones, things like that. So what is the difference? Is it just because they're getting in later in the market, there's less history? Like,
yes.
Oh.
The short answer is, but I'll expand on that, of course. Okay. The short answer is yes, but Gucci made a decision that, I think 2 or 3 years ago now, that they're going to go into high watchmaking.
Yes.
Okay. Just a quick story like this. When every year at Watches and Wonders, Gucci is not a part of Watches and Wonders in April.
Okay.
At the Palexpo, along with all the other watch brands, they host a private event, which in a villa that they rent in Geneva, where they host, let's say, an event, or they host their clients and press for the new jewelry collection, the new watch collection. And so I was lucky enough to get a tour of the Gucci villa, where they present these high-end timepieces.
Yes.
Some of their movements were in collaboration with Girard-Perregaux, and Girard-Perregaux was still a part of the Kering group, and now they took their independence, of course. But you see that there was a lot of movements that you could see across Girard-Perregaux and Gucci, which is a very reputable watch company, Girard-Perregaux. The quality is there, for sure. Now, at that price point, you're entering a price point that is new for you, right? Although the quality is there, this is a new price point. You're playing in a league that you've never played in before, right?
Okay.
So it's going to take some time for customers to warm up to the idea of spending that kind of money for a Gucci watch. Whereas the consumer who's used to buying, let's say, $250,000 watch was never looking at Gucci. They were looking elsewhere. They were looking at watch companies, not fashion companies. That doesn't mean that fashion companies can't make good watches.
Oh no, I'm sure they're doing all the testing and backing just like every other watch. Yeah, they're not going into development without doing that.
I mean, they have their own atelier in Chaux de Fonds, so everything is being done properly. Now it's just a history, and history is created with time and consistency. Of course, obviously.
How long do you think they will have to continue to put out models like?
Well, see, that's the thing. How long are they willing to do this, not seeing success? Because they could abandon it, because Gucci approaches international, and watches for Gucci is just a small part of their global numbers. So they have the retail stores where they sell handbags, perfumes, scarves, clothing, shoes, luggages, bags, everything. So all this considered, watches are a very, very small part of their portfolio. At an executive level, they're going to have to make a decision of how much more capital do we want to inject in this. I mean, one thing that's obvious right now is the Kering as a group is not where it used to be, let's say, even 5 to 10 years ago. So they've seen a slight decline in the past few years. So that means that they have to be wiser with how they allocate their budget. And so does that mean, do they want to consistently keep manufacturing these high-end timepieces, not seeing a return? This is an obvious question that they're going to have to address.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern for clients, because you don't want to, buy a watch of that caliber and then not even be able to service it, for example, afterwards, if they're no longer producing this quality. So yeah, and how long do you think they would have to continue, like 10 years, 15, 20 years before clients really start to feel like reassured?
At least another decade until they start to have their place in that price segment. Now they're doing some interesting things where they're giving customers the option to customize the watch to their liking. Let's say if they choose to have their, let's say, their birthstone on the dial instead of different colored sapphires or rubies or whatnot, they're giving the option for full customization, which is a great idea, because with some of these high-end watch brands, you don't have the possibility to do that. So in certain cases, yes, but for the most part, no. To have the ability to, let's say, customize a watch that costs, let's say, upwards of $250,000, it's
of course, of course.
It's very welcoming to consumers.
Yeah, because I guess otherwise the only options of customization, I'm assuming, is engravings.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's very good. Now I'd really like to know the Holy Grail. Which is your ultimate favorite watch of all time?
There are two answers to that. The first answer being, I personally am an Omega ambassador, and I've always been a very big Omega fan.
Yeah.
So for me, a Holy Grail would be an original 1969 caliber 321 Omega Speedmaster. That for me is a Holy Grail watch. And I do have other Grail watches. For me, as a watch enthusiast and a watch lover, I think a collection, and a serious collection, is not complete until you have a Patek Philippe perpetual calendar. So something perhaps like a Patek 5970, something a perpetual calendar, I think has a place in every serious watch collection, let's say.
Curious, from a new buyer's perspective, what is the most important thing to look out for when buying a watch?
The easy, quick answer is buy what you like.
Okay.
I say that because you're going to learn by making mistakes as well.
Yeah.
But there are certain things to consider, of course. Is it a known brand? When you're buying this watch, after sales service is something that's also important. So can this watch be serviced? If it's a quartz watch, can the battery be changed? If it's an automatic movement, can the movement be serviced? So these are all important considerations when you're buying your first timepiece. Let's say you do want to build a watch collection. Your taste will evolve and change over time. And each timepiece will be appreciated differently as your collection progresses, of course, or expands.
Oh, 100%. And you touched on movements, and that's something I'm really curious about. Can you explain what a movement is, what your preference of movement is, and what the maintenance is involved?
There are different types of movements, of course. The most popular one you will find today is a quartz movement. So quartz movement basically means that it's a battery-powered watch.
Okay.
Battery-powered watch, meaning the battery would have to be replaced every year to 2 years, depending on the watch. Then you have self-winding watches, otherwise known as automatic watches, where you have to wind the watch manually, and then with the movement of your wrist, the movement self-winds.
Okay, and how often would that winding have to occur?
Depending on the watch or the movement itself. So some watches, or most 3-hand basic automatic watches, have about a 40-hour power reserve. Most automatic chronographs have about 50-hour power reserve. And then you see movements up to 80 hours with brands like the Swatch Group brands like Tissot, Hamilton, and other Swatch Group brands now use the Powermatic 80 movement, which has an 80-hour power reserve, which is very practical. Say you wear your watch at the office, you remove it Friday night, you put it back on Monday morning, and it's still running. And then you have like exceptional cases of like watches that have 120-hour power reserve, or even longer than that. You have a wide range of power reserve, yes, and it's something to consider, of course, if it's something that you intend on wearing every day or wearing only at the office. So these are important considerations.
Yeah, I guess, because if you're not intending to wind it every other day, then that wouldn't be worth it. Maybe a quartz would be more worth it, changing it every year or 2 years. It'd be simpler. But does that lower or increase the value based off of, is quartz viewed as not as good as, another movement, a mechanic movement?
So traditionally speaking, automatic or mechanical watches, which is basically an automatic watch at its core that does not self-wind, so a mechanical watch, they've known to hold more value across time. And that's simply because the know-how, the watchmaking know-how and the expertise of assembling these movements, right? So there is a lot of expertise that goes into making these watches. So quartz movements are more easily produced and they're fairly inexpensive. So that's why the cost is often lower.
Okay.
But practicality-wise, for sure, if changing a battery every year or two is way more practical than, let's say, winding your watch every single day. But for, let's say, enthusiasts like myself, I take great pleasure in winding my watch every morning, for example.
Okay,
Yes.
so it's almost like a nice little routine.
Of course, yes.
Amazing, I love that.
It builds a connection as well, taking the time to wind your watch. It really builds, it helps build a connection into your watch. Yes, of course.
Amazing. When you're looking at watches, should you be considering the popularity of a watch? Does it matter?
I don't think it matters.
Okay.
I don't think it matters. Just like if I choose to buy a certain pair of shoes, it's because I like them. And you might not like the same pair of shoes. It's the same thing for everything. It's your taste. It's you have to buy what speaks to you, what you like. Now, there are certain icons. So when you look at the history of watches, there are a lot of icons. So like, let's say the Omega Speedmaster, the Cartier Tank, the Rolex Submariner. These are iconic watches and they have been icons for a reason. They're timeless, they're very elegant. But if we move outside of the icons, you know, there are no rules to watch collecting. There are no rules to purchasing watches because at the end of the day, we understand that you can live the rest of your life without wearing a watch.
Yeah.
So it's just an appreciation for timekeeping. It's an appreciation for horology. So why not match that with something that speaks to your that speaks to your taste as well?
Okay, I understand. Yeah, so you referenced even a little bit of history as well. I'm assuming that these pieces that, you know, the tank, these are all historical pieces that have been, for the last 100 years, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because I'm coming from a world where all the guys I know around me who are like, it needs to be exclusive, you know, it needs to be high in demand for it to be worth, you know, purchasing it. So I guess that's like a little bit of a different perspective.
Definitely. I mean, there are a lot of watch buyers. Not all watch buyers are the same, and people are in it for different reasons. Some people want to buy watches because they want to have an alternative investment, for example. They want to tie in their money to something that's going to appreciate over time. Or some people are just in it for the pure love of watches. They do not care after purchasing that if the value is going to go up or down. To me, the value of a watch is it working?
Okay.
And when it's not working, can it be serviced? And can I pass this on to the next generation?
Yes.
That to me is priceless.
Okay.
Because you're attaching a value to something that is, how can I say that you cannot put a price tag on it.
So I'm also wondering, would you recommend buying on a secondary market? I feel like nowadays you see like everybody and their grandma is like selling watches. But is that really a good idea? And like, how can you protect yourself as a consumer? Like, should you even go down that route?
As an authorized dealer myself, I always encourage and recommend to buy from an authorized dealer. This is for brand new watches, of course. I always do recommend buying from an authorized dealer for many reasons. You get the manufacturer's warranty, you get an after-sales service, you have somewhere to go to if ever you have an issue with your watch.
Yes.
Now, that being said, some watch collectors would want to buy certain vintage references or older discontinued models that you simply cannot buy at an authorized dealer. And this is where resellers or vintage watch dealers come in. There are some certainly reputable sources or places that you can buy, let's say, aftermarket watches that, you know, they offer the boxes, they offer the papers, they offer everything that is necessary to make sure that the watch, there is a legitimacy to the product you're buying. For example, if I want a birth year watches are a thing. So if I want a birth year, let's say, Rolex watch or a Patek Philippe watch or an Omega watch, then I will contact a secondary watch dealer and they will help me source this piece. And this is their expertise. This is what they specialize in. So I don't necessarily think that buying a watch, a used watch or a pre-owned watch is a bad thing. Not at all, actually. It's I own some, and I know many collectors who buy brand new watches also own certain references that don't come from, let's say, an authorized dealer.
Interesting. So basically you're recommending always to find somebody reputable, even if it's on the secondary market.
Yes.
And are there qualifications that prove this, like security of being an authorized dealer?
So,
like, how would you know, essentially? Because for
say-
you, I know I'm coming to the store. I know you're represented by the store, so there's no question of legitimacy. But how would you find somebody legitimate?
This is the tricky part, right? So you can always buy off eBay, but you have nothing. And although eBay has their own service they offer for legitimacy testing.
Yeah.
Now there are reputable dealers. So, for example, this goes with experience, knowing people from within the industry. I personally have no issue referring people to certain watch resellers, for example, who deal in all brands. And the number one thing I would say is always try to buy a watch that has the original box and the original papers that match with the serial number, and that at least that way you cover all grounds.
Yeah, for sure. I guess it'd be a lot easier to authenticate if it's genuine if you have the original boxes,
Yes.
right? Who would go above and beyond to replicate boxes? So that makes sense. One thing I was kind of curious about is a lot of the times you're going to see online, especially men will like deck out their watches, you know, they'll customize them in diamonds, things like that. Does that actually diminish the value of the piece?
Yes, it does.
It does.
It does.
And is it because you're doing it not through the service of the original brand, or is it just in general, it will always evaluate the piece?
To start off,
Yeah.
so it completely voids the warranty of the watch. If you have diamonds added to a watch, let's say the watch bezel or the watch bracelet, most of the time, and I know there are experts out there, it will not be done to manufacturer standard.
Okay.
So what you will see often is, for example, I'll give an example of the Cartier Santos, which you often see with a diamond pavé. Those are not factory diamonds, and therefore the price will drop a little bit. Now, considering the watch is in stainless steel and you're adding diamonds, the price could go up just because of the weight of the raw materials of the diamonds and whatnot. For example, if you take a Patek Philippe watch or a Rolex watch with manufactured or factory set diamonds.
So if you bring it back to, say, Patek Philippe and they will do it themselves.
No, that's not my point. So if factory set means when the watch is being made,
Okay.
or when the watch is being produced in their workshops. So these gems are set by professional gem setters. So one thing that's not spoken a lot about factory diamonds when we talk about gemstones and watches in general is brands like Patek Philippe. They have legitimate gem setters that work on the perfection of gem setting. So you're getting the highest level of setting possible.
Yeah.
It's not like you're taking it to your jeweler and he's setting diamonds. These are the top level. So when you buy a high-end timepiece, you're expecting to get the highest level of movement, the movement finishing, bracelet case finishing, but also you're getting the highest level of gem setting.
Yes.
So everything is very elegantly done. The prongs, whether it's a prong setting, whether it's a bezel setting, everything is being done very elegantly to the highest level of finishing.
Okay.
And you're getting the diamonds certified by Patek Philippe and other independent parties as well. For example, we're using Patek Philippe as an example, but you'll see this with many different brands.
Essentially, the problem is that a lot of the people doing this are not doing it with a quality of standard that is par with the watch.
Definitely.
That is the major problem. Okay, interesting. Because I know even, let's say you're wearing your watch for, I don't know, let's say a couple of years and there's scratches along it, even just polishing it will diminish the value, right?
Polishing to diminish the value. Some people who buy watches on the secondary market will prefer that the watch is untouched. Or if there is a service that has been carried out, it's been carried out by the manufacturer and you can back it with service and proof. Yes, because every brand has their own way of polishing. A brushed finish is not a standard brush finish. Grand Seiko, for example, has their own polishing technique called the Zaratsu polishing. Okay. And if I give this to any watchmaker or jeweler, they will not be able to replicate this level of finishing because the experts at Grand Seiko who can do the Zaratsu polishing have years of training and experience. So there is no way to replicate that.
I love that, yeah, because we hear a lot of things, but this is a very clear explanation, so thank you. So talking about maintenance, how often should somebody come in and bring their watch?
So standard, I would say, is about, for an automatic watch, I would say is about every 5 years. Now, if this is a dive watch and you go diving with it, then I would say every 2 to 3 years is more reasonable since all the gaskets would need to be changed.
Okay.
But certain brands with the quality of testing they do, so for example, a brand like Omega, that they do they have the coaxial escapement and then the movement itself gets sent to the COSC for 15 days of testing, and then after it passes testing, the movements go inside the casing and the watch with the movement with the casing gets sent to METAS for META certification. When a watch is tested to that extent, I don't think it is necessary for you to have your watch serviced every 3 to 5 years. I would say more so every 5 to 8 years.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
And if you see that after, let's say, 6 or 7 years, that the watch is holding or is keeping time to the second, which is very difficult, but let's say it's keeping very good time, you could extend that even a little bit.
Oh,
yes, of course.
interesting. So it's really low maintenance in the end. Unless if you're diving, but that's,
yes,
that's
exactly.
the unusual case, I'm sure.
Yes. Maybe not waiting too long either, because
Yeah.
if you wait too long, say after 8 years you see that your watch is working fine, and then you forget about it for another 5 years, then it could actually do some damage to the watch when the oils dry up inside the watch.
Okay.
Then it would be a more costly repair instead of doing a maintenance service, because parts would need to be changed out because the regular servicing was not done. So it's also an important.
Where can we find you if somebody's looking for a watch?
You can find me in person at La Maison Monaco. Any La Maison Monaco location, we can set up an appointment. If you want to come see me physically, I spend most of my time at Royal Mount, at our Royal Mount boutiques, open since September 5th here in Montreal for the first time with a new Omega boutique, a new IWC boutique, and our multi-brand store opening soon. Or you can find me on social media. That's my full name, Leon Kehyeyan. You can find Maison Monaco's social media on Instagram, Facebook, at La Maison Monaco. And don't hesitate to send me a message, reach out if you have any questions. Brands that we carry or we do not carry, I'm a watch enthusiast first, so please don't hesitate if you have any questions to reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime, leave the comments down below. We'll try to answer them. And I will leave his info as well, so if you want to reach out to him, if you're looking for a watch, by all means, hit him up. So thank you so much, Leon.
Right. Thank you for having me. This was fun. Yes, all right. Take care.
Bye.
Right. In the last few years, with the growth of watch media, we hear a lot about case sizes, which previously we didn't hear a lot of. I interact with a lot of people on a daily basis who want to buy watches that they fix a number in their head and they want to stick by that number because they think that's the size that's appropriate for their wrist.
Yeah.
One thing I have to say is, did you try on the watch? Are you limiting yourself to a number, or did you actually try on the watch? It's very important to get the watch on your wrist to see how the proportions fit. Not all 40 millimeters wear the same. Not all 36 millimeters wear the same.
Yeah.
There are many different considerations. The thickness of the watch, the length of the lugs, the shape of the lugs. So all these things, you can't, there's no way of measuring it. You have to put it on your wrist and see how it fits on your wrist. So it could be 40 millimeter that wears like a 38 millimeter or 44 millimeter. So it's very important,
To just
man or
try it
woman,
on. Yeah.
have the watch on your wrist and see how you like it.